Hi, I'm Joe Whyte, the voice of Chris Redfield.
Can you see that area behind me beneath the red tinted sky? That is what's left of Raccoon City.
Our platoon is cut off. No survivors found.
I'd rather starve to death in here than be eaten by one of those undead monsters!
We're both gonna die.
Wait, don't shoot!
Down! I lost all my men because of her!
All is lost. Cries of agony.
Stars!
Unity breeds power. Power is life.
Resident Evil.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Shootout Podcast. I'm your host Ross Baxter and today is episode 93 of the series. The Shootout Podcast is a weekly series where I bring on guests from the film and game industries. Today on the show, by gosh, do we have an amazing guest for you. We've got a really special guest on the show. He's the voice of so many incredible characters from Resident Evil, Emperor's New Groove, Hotel Transylvania to SpongeBob. We have actor, comedian and artist Joe Whyte. Joe, it's a pleasure having you on. Thanks for coming on.
It's a super pleasure to be here, Ross. Thank you so much.
Dude, like I was saying to you before we went live, trust me, it means so much having you on. We can dive into so many different topics on how to become an actor and talk about the world of voice acting. But what I'll do is I'll throw it over to you just to tell us a wee bit about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
Where did this all begin?
Well, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in California, which, if you know anything about the San Fernando Valley, it's just over the hill from Hollywood. Hollywood, topologically, is on the south side of the, what are they called? There's a very small mountain range that separates Los Angeles from the San Fernando Valley. But the San Fernando Valley was where a lot of stars and people who worked in the entertainment industry came to live, made their homes in the San Fernando Valley because it was kind of away from the city and kind of suburbia. And back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even, I was born in 61, even in my childhood, up until the 70s, there were still a lot of ranches and farms and a lot of open area in the San Fernando Valley. But like I said, a lot of people from the industry lived in the valley. And when I was growing up in the 60s, it was inevitable that everybody knew some famous people. Everybody knew actors. Everybody knew famous musicians because a lot of these people just lived in our neighborhoods. And so I was introduced to the entertainment industry at a very young age, not from my family. My family was very blue collar, very, it had nothing to do with performing of any kind. My family was very musical. I have 3 older sisters, and which is how I learned how to sing harmonies. They had they would sing, they would play guitars and sing songs together, and they would sing in 3-part harmony. And me, the feisty, jerky little brother, had to find my voice in that group. So I learned how to sing the fourth harmony part by doing that. So I'm very good with harmonies. If I'm singing.
No, this is amazing. Awesome.
And but that was really it. And in my family, I was the only one who kind of got the acting bug. Everybody else was just, doing other things. And I'll tell you how. Here's the singularity. Here's where it all came together, and I knew that I wanted to be an actor. When I was in, I want to say, 7th grade or 8th grade, I was going to Northridge Junior High School in Northridge, where I grew up, and there was a girl in the acting class that I had a crush on.
Okay, perfect.
So I joined the acting class at my junior high. Never got together with the girl, but fell in love with acting. I had found my people. I had found my tribe.
It led you on the right path. You can't go wrong there.
It changed the course of my life. It really redirected my river. And so I fell in love with acting at that point and just always wanted to do it from then. And didn't really get into, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have someone to tell me how to navigate the entertainment industry, how to get an agent, how to do all those things until I got into high school. And
Okay.
a teacher, Barbara Yannick. She's wonderful. She's still around and she's still absolutely amazing. She was the theater teacher at Cleveland High School, and she had some professional performing experience herself. She was an actress and a model. And she kind of took me under her wing and taught me, how to kind of become professional. Now, after high school, I went in the Navy and was in the Navy for a couple of years until I got hurt. And I even found ways to keep performing when I was in the Navy. I was stationed in New London, Connecticut, and there was there was a theater group on the base. And so I did a couple of shows with them there and got out of the Navy, came back and went to Cal State Northridge and studied theater there. And that was kind of when I turned pro and started doing actual
That's where it all began.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it kicked off. I started in voiceover at Disney. I had never done voiceover, and what they, you're probably well familiar with this. They when you're working on an animated film, you do what they call scratch dialogue. Yep. So for all of you out there listening who don't know what scratch is, when you're making an animated film, you draw a bunch of pictures. They're called storyboard pictures, or what would they call them? Panels. And they put all those together. They put them on video, and they string them together to time out sequences to see how the script and how the visuals of the film are coming together. They do kind of this rough pass with storyboard pictures. And what they do is record actors, generally people from the studio, not pros, just anyone who's working in the studio who wants to come into the recording booth and do a voice. They'll look for someone who kind of matches what they're going for. Record the entire film as though it was, the voice is being used in the film, to time out the sequences, to make sure that the dialogue is working, to see where the jokes are, to, this is kind of the rough pass on the audio for the film. And once they do that, they get it all right. Then they bring in the professional actors and they replace all of those scratch lines. Well, I was working on Hercules. The first film that I worked on at Disney was Hercules. And I was a production assistant in the editorial department. And the editorial department is the department that handles all of the voiceover for the film. They record everything and cut it all into the reels. And so one of the characters in Hercules, I think it was either Pain or Panic, was voiced by a comedian named Bobcat Goldthwait.
Right.
Oh, are you familiar with Bobcat?
I'm not familiar. I'm not. I've got lots of catching up to do.
Well, Bobcat has a character that he does in his stand-up act, and he kind of talks like this. He's got this really crazy voice.
That's so awesome.
Nobody wanted to try to do an impersonation of Bobcat in the booth, so I went, I'll do it.
That's how you jumped in. Perfect.
I have no, public filters. So, so I did it. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Voiceover is the best. You get to play characters that you would never be cast as physically. You get to play old wizards and dragons and Gollum, and just all these crazy characters doing voiceover.
Yeah.
It's so freeing. And I fell in love with it and kept doing it at the studio for years. And one of the directors said, hey, I've got this friend who's a voiceover agent. Would you like me to hook you up? We did, and I'm still with Steve Nybert, Purium 7 agency, and I've been with them for years.
That's incredible. What a story, because you've done so many things, and that's what we were talking about beforehand. And you're an artist yourself, you've done all these different things. When did you was it because of Hercules that you transitioned completely, or did you work on the side doing art as well? How did you balance those two, or was it completely just straight on to acting?
Well, this is my big dirty secret. Is this will be, I'm sure, revealed by the Daily Mail at some point. if I ever make it big.
Here, come on! You're the voice of so many amazing things. You've got so many things to talk about. Never sell yourself short. It's an amazing journey you've got.
I never went to art school. And it's funny. Even though I am technically an artist, that's the job that I do, and the job that I make most of my income on is my modeling career. Not modeling as in walking the runway, but 3D modeling. And I got into that through, not just through the back door, but through an unmarked side vent window. You couldn't do today what I did. I was just in the right place at the right time, and that place was Disney. When I started at Disney in '95, there weren't a lot of modelers in the world. The 3D animated films. Toy Story had just come out. It was just kicking off. It was that part of animation was just getting going, and I got the job at Disney because my friend's girlfriend was working as a PA on Hercules, and I was working as a clerk at Buena Vista Home Video. Buena Vista Home Video was the video distribution wing of Disney back then. And I was just working as a clerk because before Disney, I was working at a law firm as a paralegal. And so my friend's girlfriend called up one day and she said, hey, we're looking for another production assistant on Hercules. Would you like to come over and, work at feature animation? And of course, being a Disney kid and growing up all things Disney, I jumped at the chance. I had no idea that I would ever be a part of that process. I didn't know what I could bring to the table other than being a production assistant. I certainly had done a lot of that work prior to Disney and prior to the law firm. I had done a lot of work in game shows, production assistant work. So I jumped at the chance and I went over and worked on Hercules, was introduced to the animation industry, fell in love with it, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the artists, and I worked on Hercules for about 6 months, and then the film was done and I was let go. But the following Monday after I was let go, I got a call for another job at Feature Animation as an operations coordinator. Operations was a little office at the end of the loading dock at the animation building that took care of the building. And, so if an artist's light bulb went out, we would call the electricians and they would go. We were the coordination for everything that took care of the building. So in the course of working in what they called Cranium Command, that was the operations department, over the course of about a year and 3 or 4 months, I met all of the artists in the building, Andreas Deja and Glenn Keane. And
all the big names.
all the big names. Ken Duncan, T-Dan Hofstedt. All the greatest animators in the world. Talk about inspiration.
Yeah, of course, you can't beat it.
You walk around that building and you're just, everything around you is wonderful art, cool people, and people who are passionate and devoted to making great movies. And it was just, it was Candyland. It was absolutely where I wanted to be. One day I was walking around the building and I ran into, I walked past the office of an artist named Johann Klingler,
Mm-hmm.
who's a wonderful layout guy, designer. I mean, he's just a fantastic artist. And he was modeling the bell tower to Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Wow, right, okay.
So I was like, wow, what are you doing? What is that? How are you doing that? He's like, well, this is a program called Alias Power Animator. Maya didn't exist yet. And, and I'm modeling, I'm doing this thing. So I said, I'm fascinated by that. He said, well, I'll have them set up an account on the system for you. And so you can learn how to do it. And I fell in love with modeling. I got the Alias Power Animator handbook, which was about 2.5 inches thick, and just went through it from cover to cover. It took me about a year. And I used to sit in this little computer lab and learn how to model. Lunchtimes, after work, weekends. I even took a week's vacation
Mm-hmm.
and stayed in the lab the entire time, just training.
Yep. Just getting ahead.
The company saw that, and one day one of the CG leads came into the operations department and said, Joe, we have an opening for a modeler trainee on Tarzan. Do you want the job? And of course I jumped at the chance.
For it, yeah.
Became a modeler on Tarzan and just modeled, from then on, that became my life. That and performing. I was also, at the same time, I was doing a lot of improv, and I was in a group called Comedy Sports here in Los Angeles, and did probably hundreds of shows with them. And then at the same time, I was doing a show called The Impromptones, which was all musical improvisation. And, combine that with learning how to do voiceover at Disney and getting that part of my career going.
You've done so much. That's the crazy thing, because it's like how many I know this is so I was doing my research and going into like all the voices, etc., and everything about your career. To everyone who's like tuning in, when it comes to, I guess, acting, I know it's not the easiest profession to get into, and sometimes it takes a wee bit of luck and timing. And one of the main things that I learned when you were talking to the guys in the Resident Evil podcast is, especially when it comes to voices, is that like you need to have like the right voice for the role. And when it comes to beginners, like what advice would you give to people who are wanting to kind of get into this as a career? Like, where should they begin?
The first thing that I would tell anybody considering a career in acting is, if you can be happy doing anything else, go do that.
Yep, exactly. It's always a bit passionate at the day. You have to be 100% honest with yourself.
You have to be, because it is, you said there are a lot of factors involved. One of them being luck. You have to be in the right place at the right time. You have to have the right look. You have to have the right sound. That being said, anybody can act. Anybody can try to act, but what you have to be ready for is the possibility that you may never be the right one for parts. And you have to be able to say, I can handle any rejection.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part about acting, is that it's a numbers game. You audition all the time, and then once in a while you're the right person for the thing. And I'm talking about at the lowest level, the basic actor who's not a name, who's not anywhere near famous or whatnot. There's so much competition, and you're going to be up against people who have a lot of training, and some people who are very, very, very talented and very ready for the parts that they're up for. And you have to be okay with being competitive. If that's not your thing, you're going to go through a lot of hell. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to be upset. You're going to sit there and say, what's wrong with me? Why not? Why can't I make it in this industry? You have to understand that it's not you. I mean, it is you, but it's not personal.
Of course. How did you handle the setbacks? Like, what did you do through the years? Was it just obviously just constantly working and just waiting until the moment kicked off?
It's, you can't wait for any moments in this industry. You constantly have to be going after stuff until you get to a point where you're a name, and then people will be asking for you based on what you've done. But you never get to relax. You never get to sit back and wait for phone calls to come in. You constantly have to be pursuing it yourself. You constantly have to be saying, what can I do today to further my career? That's very hard about acting, is you're selling a product, and you are that product. You have to be your own marketing department, unless of course you have a great agency. And if you're with William Morris or ICM or some other big company, they're going to, your agency and their departments are going to push you. They're going to promote you. But you also have to have a publicist and a manager, and these are people who are out there looking for opportunities for you. And until you get to that point where you have those people, you're it. You have to be your own marketing department. You have to be the one who's walking the streets and knocking on doors and sending in demo tapes and making phone calls. And that, I think, is the gate that stops a lot of people from getting into the business.
I completely agree.
Because that's the work of it. That's the groundwork. That's the grunt work, if you will, that people don't do.
Like, I think one of the things that I feel has changed a lot over the years, especially over the last few decades, based off hearing my stories from my father, like going through like the family generation, etc. I don't feel people are as go-getters as much as they used to be, in terms of actually, there's a lot more easier things these days, and because of that, people are a lot more laid back, but they still don't realize at the end of the day, the formula never lies. It's always a bit hard work no matter what. Like I say, every interview I've ever done, I've interviewed hundreds of people now, and the most repetitive question I'll always say, now I always like to bring up, is like, there's no like any kind of secret, kind of like, there's no easy way. It's yes, sometimes, I know you mentioned sometimes you get a wee bit of luck now and then, but you can't rely on that. Like, you have to put the time in. And I think when it comes to my next question is, like, what do you think has changed since you started out to now? Has there been any major differences to the people's like approach to acting?
Absolutely, and the largest factor is social media. That has changed the entire complexion of the entertainment industry.
Do you think in a benefit though, or do you think a bit of both?
I have a love-hate relationship with social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm a bit old-fashioned in that I don't really like it. I like the aspect of Facebook that allows me to stay in touch with my friends and my family. I hate how politicized it has become.
Yep, completely agree.
And I hate that there are so many people out there in the world who abuse it, and the disinformation campaigns. I mean, all the nasty stuff that's being done through social media is just breaking. It's just I don't think it's ever been revealed as much as it is now in these days through social media, how many disruptive groups there are in the world. It just seems like the world has become a meaner place thanks to social media. The good side of it is staying in touch with your friends, and
of course,
funny, the comedy that can come out of it. I guess it's society under a microscope, and you get to see people because of the anonymity, even partial anonymity. I mean, you certainly know who the people that you're connected to on Facebook are, but I think people feel empowered to say or do things on social media that they wouldn't do in public. And that has changed the complexion of how we relate to each other. And I think that intrinsically changes the face of entertainment. I think the basic reason for entertainment, the reason that entertainment evolved with humanity was to communicate. I imagine, cavemen sitting around a fire, and the two guys who went out on the hunt that day getting up in front of the whole group and telling the story of the hunt. And it was for survival. It was like, there are antelope in that field over there. We went and we killed one, so maybe we should go back there tomorrow. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing, but
No, I know what you mean. It's social media. It's so the one thing that we get so distracted by it, we're on it too much, and when it comes to like the crafting of the day, like obviously like there's lots of benefits to social media in the sense that you can learn so many things through tutorials, etc. There's a lot more freedom in terms of free resources out there now because of it. But at the end of the day, it's making sure you don't get too sidetracked from it and not relying on it. I think we rely on social media too much rather than the thing that you said, which is the most important, which is like the interaction, just like general life, like just actually going out, experiencing new things, and not just being stuck inside, sitting all the time looking at our screens. And the good thing about like carrying on this conversation about social media is what you said about the marketing aspect. So when it comes to getting jobs, there's more kind of way to do that, if you know what I mean.
yeah, definitely there are more opportunities to market yourself in terms of social media. You can definitely. I mean, I have my own Facebook page for Joe Whyte voiceovers. I think and going back to what I said about it changing the way we survive as performers, especially if you are a celebrity, or if you are trying to establish your name in the public eye, you have to be on social media. People now in productions that are looking for actors who are social influencers. They'll only hire an actor who has 1 million followers on TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
That was never a factor, certainly for me coming up. There was no way to quantify a person's influence in the world the way it is now. You can look at, oh well, they've got 2 million Instagram followers, so they have they have a built-in audience. And I think that's what these companies are looking for, is people with. It's the same way in screenwriting. A lot of people who are in the position of looking for scripts to produce are looking for if you have something called a pre-sold franchise. In other words, I have a script that's about something that a bunch of people are into. Let's say I'm going to write a script about NASCAR. That's a pre-sold franchise. You have, and it's it's about something that a bunch of people already know about. So they're looking for actors who already have a fan base.
Yep, they already have a backing.
Right, yeah. And so those people, they know that if they do a movie with that person, these 2 million people are going to be interested in seeing that movie because they're already following this person on some other media. Certainly never a factor when I was coming up.
Because, I'm so happy you raised that, because there was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, which is actually this topic exactly. So when Jurassic Park came out years ago, it's like the reason why. So when I was watching the documentaries, I'm a massive Steven Spielberg fan, and everyone was always talking about like what made it so successful. And one of the main reasons was none of us knew the cast. Like literally, they were all new names. Everyone was like, it was believable. It was like it made sense. It was just like one of the things you were saying on the Resident Evil podcast was. When it comes to being Chris Redfield, it was like the person you were, we could relate to. And when it comes to what you're saying there about social media these days and so many things going on with followerships, etc., and they're just focusing kind of, I guess, on the money aspect, it takes away that immersion, that experience that we're wanting or that we're craving. Like, we wouldn't have, if they gave us just like this kind of generic hero version in Resident Evil instead of you, it wouldn't be the same. Like we love Resident Evil because of what you did and how we felt so connected with it. Like that's why it was such a strong performance, if you know what I mean. And it's such an interesting topic because at the end of the day, it's we get so sidetracked about how many people follow me, who likes me and stuff, rather than focusing on the story itself.
Yeah, I agree. When the social media aspect of something becomes the focal point, then it's lost its fundamental reason for existing, I think. I'll go back to what I feel about the origins of performing anyway is about communication. All performance is about communicating a thought or presenting a possibility to the audience. You have an audience. Let's say you're doing a play. You are trying to communicate the fact that this character that you're playing is going through a hard time. That the whole point of performing is to make other people feel something. It's not for self-aggrandizement.
Yeah.
It's because I want to use my body as a vehicle to show another point of view or to examine an aspect of the human condition. And I'm going to put myself through this process for you, the audience. I'm going to put myself through this process to give as real a performance as I can, so that you, the audience, experience the false experience of my performance, which, you know, you're looking at something that's not true. I mean, all performance is kind of it's representing something, but you're not looking at the actual event. But through that performance, you're trying to reach into a person and make them feel something. And without that, I think that the performance is moot. When you give a good performance, you really are giving your energy. You're giving your essence over to other people. If you're doing it right, you reach that point of just satori, where you lose yourself in the part. You're up on stage, and there's a thing that happens where if you're really in the moment, you forget that you're performing, and it becomes
You become the character.
it becomes a kind of real. And those moments are fleeting. I mean, I've never had that moment last through an entire play. You know, it's like there are just moments when everything clicks, and that's when the most honesty comes out of you. That's when the most truth comes out of it, because you're kind of detached from reality and suffusing the moment with this kind of real energy. Those moments are few and far between, but boy, are they satisfying when they happen.
Yeah, it's the best feeling, because like carrying on this kind of feeling of like or this concept of like performance and acting. One of the things that surprised me, so I'm completely new to the whole world of voice acting. Like, I've been doing my research the last few weeks, getting up to date, catching up, etc. And one of the things that really surprised me is, through all the documentaries and videos I've been watching, is supposedly when it comes to actually performing the characters, there's not much interaction between the actual like characters themselves. Like, you guys are just doing like you'll be in a booth and like you'll be on your own. Has that been the same for like all the time, like in game and film, or is that just it just depends?
Yeah, that I think that has been pretty much the same since the beginning. Most of the time when I work, I am alone.
Interesting, right? Okay.
It's very rare that you have group reads where you have all the actors, in one room doing that. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is the obvious reason of being able to record clean, so that you don't have people talking on top of each other.
Right, so saving time.
Yeah, in the editing process, that saves you time, because you don't have, if you have people talking over each other in a recording, there's no way to extract those and have them be individual voices. It's almost always an individual thing where you're looking at a script on a music stand, and you're imagining your interaction with other people. Now, sometimes a director will sit in the booth with you and read against you. They'll read the lines, and you perform them back. And voiceover is a little different from other types of acting in that it's very different from on-camera acting. Immerse yourself in situations that you would never be able to do on screen. For instance, there's a video game out there that has my voice as a man on fire screaming.
A man on fire, perfect, right? Okay.
I'm never going to probably never going to play a man on fire.
Of course, in real life, because you don't want to be doing that as a dangerous path to be going down.
Exactly. So you get to do things in voiceover that you would never physically do. And I mentioned earlier that that's one of the beautiful things about voiceover is that you get to do things that you would never do on camera. You get to play the voice of these crazy characters. And you can be doing the voice of a squirrel 1 minute, and then the next minute you're doing as a 60-foot tall mechanical robot that's about to crush a village. The gamut of voices that you can go through in a single day really is inexhaustible.
Speaking of voices, like, how many can you do? Like, I know that's probably like the craziest question, but is it just like endless? Just goes on and on?
Well, I think it is kind of endless because I've done a lot of different kinds of voices, and I think limited it's only limited by what you're willing to put yourself through, because you can change your voice. You intrinsically have a tone that you sound like. I mean, there are those famous voices that when you hear, you go, oh, that's so and so, because it's such a recognizable signature tone. If I start talking like this, you're gonna know that it's Christopher Walken. His tone is so perfectly recognizable. But that's one of the wonderful things about voiceover, is that you can change your tone to be all these different crazy characters. And you can actually, if you have a very high voice, say you're a high tenor voice, you can, because the voice is a muscle, you can work out that muscle so that you can get nice deep voice. It really is. People don't understand that their voice is a muscle. And you can train those muscles. People don't realize that you can do this. You can work out your larynx to where you can sound differently than you do today. And it doesn't take a long time. You can do that in 2 weeks. Doing daily vocal exercises will change the timbre of your voice. And so that's another thing people don't realize. You don't just become a voiceover actor and then you say, okay, I'm a voiceover actor, and you go on about your daily life waiting for voiceover gigs. You have to train. Actors have to train constantly. There's something called chops. If you've either got the chops or you don't. And if you don't exercise, if you are not taking scene study classes, and you're not doing on-camera classes, and you're not, constantly working on your craft, when the time comes, an opportunity arises, you're not going to be ready. Another thing a lot of young actors don't realize is that the people who make it are people who obsess about acting all day, every day. They're the only ones who end up having the chops at the end of the day, because the people who want to be actors for the social aspect of it, or because it's cool, or because they are egocentric and they want to, look like, hey, I'm an actor, they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
The friends that I have who've really made it, who are celebrities, are people who could not do anything else.
That was just their passion. Yeah, of course.
And it's not something that you can manufacture. It has to be intrinsic to your core being that this is going to be an actor. And there's no question about it.
I know you said they're having like just practicing all these different things. Like the clear message I'm getting is it's just down to hard work and practicing all these different options, because you can't be picky. Like you can't be, oh, I want to do this too early on. Like you have to kind of, I guess, maybe do free roles as well. Like start things off, build your portfolio, build your reel, and then you just keep building it up from there.
I think you're right. I think all of those things that you said are right. And it basically is that snowball effect of accumulating experiences that add up to the total you.
So like when it comes to acting and stuff, on a day, it's all about putting the time in, trying different things, different voices, etc. And one of the main things that I learned early on from the start is that you said like the power of like marketing and like learning like the business aspects. So one of the things I realized that a lot of artists tend to do wrong, and this isn't just acting related, this is like, I think everything, is that I see everything as like you should be a business no matter what. Like everyone should at least learn like the basics. So for example, my main thing is environment art and presenting and interviews, etc. However, I know people who are wanting a career as an artist, they may think, oh, I just need to make the art. However, like there's so much things to it. If you start learning marketing and all the different aspects of freelance, and things just open up, and you get to kind of learn how to sell yourself and create better options for yourself, and that tailors into what you do. So obviously when it comes to acting, figuring out these things to really help get the momentum rolling can go such a long way.
Absolutely. And going back in time, I didn't have anyone to prepare me, didn't have any mentors other than my high school drama teacher, who really were there for me to push me in professional ways. My parents couldn't do it because they weren't in the entertainment industry. So I didn't have anyone behind me saying, here's what you should do. Everything I did was improv, was like, oh, I'm going to go do this now. I'm going to go, oh, there's a comedy group. I'll go audition for that and I'll be in that for a while. And I didn't have that focused, here's your career. I never looked at it as a career. It was always something that I just wanted to be. I wanted to be an actor. And that meant doing shows, but I didn't have the focused aspect of that, of I'm going to do this show because this will put me in front of this person. Everything I did was sort of slapdash, willy-nilly, just going out and performing. There was never a point to it. I didn't have a plan. I guess that's what it boils down to is,
of course,
I just wanted to perform and I didn't have a plan as to how that was going to happen.
So would you say it's all about being Pacific, or because I understand it's such a competitive market, there's lots of things going on, and yes, there's lots of opportunities. Like, I'm not trying to discourage anyone. Like, it's an amazing profession to go into, and it's great hearing everything about your journey, etc. But through your way of doing it, it was like trial and error, seeing what options were available, going back and forth, whether it was in games with Resident Evil, going into Disney through Hercules, like Emperor's New Groove, all these different things going at once. And obviously you learn so much from that as well. However, also like having what Joe said there, like being able to know what you want, it can make or break so many different things, and it makes things so much smoother. But at the end of the day, I understand it's a difficult question. It's not always the easiest. It's normally the hardest question you can ever be asked is like, what do you want to do? Like, you could be like, I want to be the voice actor of, the next, Alien franchise, but you have to wait till that movie to come out and then you're going against competition. Like, but that's the great thing about what you did, though, because it's making sure you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I think that's always a wise thing to do. And, it really, I think it boils down to, do you want to be a professional?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to make a career of this, or do you want to be a hobbyist? Do you enjoy performing, so therefore you're going to be a community theater actor, or join the local comedy group or whatever? Or do you want to be a pro? Do you want to go national? Do you want to go global? What is your desire? And it's totally fine if all you want to do is local community theater and small. That's not everybody has to be an aggressive professional. It's all about making a career out of this.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be that way, and it's perfectly fine for people to not want to take it any further than something that they do for fun. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to determine that, and you can't get angry at yourself if at the end of the day, at the end of your life, you look back and you say, I never achieved the things that I wanted to achieve, because you didn't go about it you weren't clear about what you wanted to be in the beginning. You didn't have a target. You didn't know where you wanted to end up. So therefore you didn't have a focused end goal.
Completely agree. I think that you nailed it there perfectly, because one of the things for me, so I love a good chat, hence why I do a podcast. Like, no, to me, conversation has always been my thing. Like, I could talk for days, and obviously my career started off with wanting this pursuit for doing art all the time, and I love art, etc., and I've always done sport. However, as I was working along the way, I started realizing what was becoming more of a hobby rather than something I wanted to do as a career, because there was certain things that I was like, well, this is kind of the fun's almost going away, and I wanted to make sure that I was constantly enjoying it. And that's why I've always stuck to doing my podcast, because doing my podcast is the thing that I know that's where I get my, like, it's just like you with voice acting, like when you get into that full character and you're just becoming so involved and immersed, etc. Like, that's the feeling I have when I do my podcast, and that's the feeling that you want to go for, if you know what I mean. And even if it may not kick off, it may take you a few years or I don't know, a decade to find the answer you're looking for. But it's what Joe's saying, you're only going to figure out if you try it. And you've tried all these different things and you figured out, right, what works for you and what doesn't. And that's the thing that we tend to put too much pressure on ourselves. Like, we always kind of say, oh, I need to know an answer now. But you don't. It's like, it just do what you think is natural for you. Like, give it the time.
Yeah, exactly. And you're absolutely right. An answer can take 5 years. Knowledge is accumulated over time. And we could descend at this point into a very metaphysical conversation.
Yeah, very philosophical. We could go full depth. Well, I still got plenty, like a lot of questions left when it comes to the acting side of things. If you want to dive into that, is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I reached out to a lot of people to try and get certain questions that they were looking for. So one of the things you said right at the start was you mentioned the word agent, and obviously when it comes to kickstarting your career, I know you don't want to find an agent straight off the bat. Like, sometimes you have to dive into just free roles, etc. But what advice would you give for people who are at that stage? Like, when should they start looking for that kind of agent in their career?
Well, there's really no bad time to look for an agent, but it's agents are kind of metaphysical things. Getting an agent is difficult because there's so much competition. Agents only want to represent people that they think are going to work. At the end of all days, it's really about money, which is not entirely true. I mean, I would still perform even if I couldn't get paid to do it, because it's something that I love to do. But really, what we're trying to do is make careers as performers. The sort of old-fashioned way of doing it is to send out your picture and resume to as many agents as you can, and basically what you're doing is throwing chum in the water and trying to get someone to bite. The best relationship that you can have is if you get an agent, form a relationship with an agent that gets you. There are agencies, in my experience, it's easy to get a commercial agent because they do so much stuff and it's like popcorn. It's like a lot of it is kind of generic and, more difficult to get a theatrical agent.
Okay.
Because theatrical jobs are fewer and far between than commercial jobs. And commercial jobs, the perception is that commercial acting is not as difficult or as deep as theatrical acting. It's not true. All acting is, you've got to be as prepared and as sort of technically pumped up, if you will, to perform in commercials as you do on TV or film. Finding an agent who gets you and wants to get you out there, is going to submit you for the right kinds of jobs that you're likely to book. That's difficult. It's difficult enough just getting an agent. Getting one that gets you is even more difficult. Another aspect is who you know in this industry.
Yeah,
really,
I completely agree. That's always a big one.
A lot of it is it can be very nepotistic. If you have family that's in the industry, they're going to put in a good word to so-and-so, and it makes it a lot easier to get in. So I guess for an average person who is really not connected to the industry and has no friends or family that are in the industry, getting to know people who are in the industry is important. There are things like showcases.
Okay,
where
nice, perfect.
Actors can go and sometimes you buy into a showcase. It can be $100. or $150, and you buy a spot in a showcase where you're allowed to do like a 10 or 15 minute performance in front of an audience that contains agents and producers and people looking for talent. That's how I got a part on General Hospital, the soap opera. I did a showcase, and the casting director for General Hospital was there at the showcase and gave part on General Hospital based on my performance in that. So showcases are a great way for young actors to be seen. Showcase performances. You can do plays in Hollywood or in the Valley, and invite, do an agents night where you invite, 10 or 15 agents to come to the show for free, and you get to be seen by the agents. That's a great way to make acquaintances, to meet the people who are in positions of power to hire you for things. That's probably the best way to do it.
Thanks so much for that, because that's insane. Because I think this is the biggest, this is the great thing about having you on the podcast. So when it comes to my perspectives, because obviously I know very little, so when it comes to my perspective, it's I naturally, when I think voice acting, it's not as broad as it actually is. My original thought, I'm right, okay, they're in a booth, they're reading over things, etc. But that's not it. There's so much more to it. It's what you said. There's acting. There's going into theater. There's commercials. There's all these different things. Literally, you see adverts. All these different things. Literally, voice acting is used for everything. And there's so many different ways to dive into this industry. And like you're saying there, reach out to these people, learn how to develop a foundation to eventually then start diving into more of a niche that you're focused towards, that you actually care about. And it's just the thing about what you said right at the start, it's when it comes to acting, it's not an easy profession, but if you love it and you really care about it, you'll figure all these things out. Yes, it may take you lots of time, but that's the commitment you have to put in.
And it's, to cut down on the amount of time that it takes, every time you make an acquaintance, every time you do a show with other actors and you learn from their experience, the more you immerse yourself in that world, the more your knowledge base grows and the more inspiration you'll have to do things that will further your career.
Mm-hmm.
You'll meet people who have been there. You'll meet people who have accomplished whatever phase of your career you're going through, and they can give you tips. I think everyone's experience is inevitably vastly different from everybody else's. You can't sit down and say, here's how you do it. Here's the roadmap. Here's the, if you want to take the straight highway from here to professional actor, this is the way. There's no way to do that.
Yeah, there's never A to B.
Right, yeah. And I think that that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, I keep saying end of the day.
It's okay. I've got my favorite word as well. My favorite word is awesome. Everybody knows it. They're Ross is going to be saying awesome 25 times a day. Perfect. On the list.
For awesome.
Perfect. I'll take it.
At the end of the day, we want to be, who do you want communicating to you? Do you want to hear the same voice communicating to you all the time? Or do you want to hear the full range that the human species can embody? I mean, that's really, that kind of goes to the core of our experience as human beings on this planet, is to experience as much diversity as possible, to experience as many cultures as possible, to, that's what gives you a wide experience of the world. If you're closed-minded and you're living in a little, village that you never leave, and you don't understand how the rest of the world operates or thinks or feels, you've robbed yourself of 90% of the human experience. I think good words of advice would be go wide. Go as wide as you can. Experience as much of the world as you possibly can, especially as an actor, because you're going to be asked, especially as a voiceover actor, you're going to be asked to present points of view from aspects of the world that you don't have any idea what the reality is. You could be asked to play the voice of a Nepalese Sherpa climbing a mountain. I mean, I wouldn't probably be asked to do that. And certainly in this day and age, casting people would be more likely to find an actual Nepalese person to do the voice of something like that. But you get the point. You're asked as a voiceover person to do a very wide range of experiences and very wide range of characters. And the wider your range is, the more valuable you are as a voiceover person.
When it comes to people's reel, so the thing that they submit, as in like their portfolio, like do you have to be like tailor everything down, like be very specific, or should you have just as broad as possible, like having like, I don't know, 10 voices, 15 voices? Like what would you consider a good starting point to kind of kick things off?
First of all, you're not going to have one reel. You're going to have several demo reels, and one of them will be animated voices, one of them will be commercial voices, one of them will be promo voices, one of them will be broadcast voices. Whatever genres of voiceover you want to do, you're going to have a separate demo reel for each of those. And in terms of your animation reel, is probably where you're going to get the widest amount of character types, because that's really your character animation reel is going to give you the opportunity to showcase your range. Now, if there's something that you do particularly well, like I'm going to be the basso profundo voice, that's always going to talk like this. This is my intrinsic character. I'm going to be this guy. You do a reel where it's just that voice doing several different types of readings.
Mm-hmm.
Angry, happy, sad, but whatever, to showcase your speciality. And then maybe you have another reel where you do some voices that are like this, and then you do some, and you do a pirate voice, and you have all these the range of things that you can do on that reel to show. And then, that you're going to send out whatever reel is appropriate for that type of audition. Or on your agency page, like they're going to list all their actors and they're going to have their demo reels next to their names so that people can go through and listen to what these actors sound like. You're probably going to have, 2 or 3 or 4 of your reels are going to be up next to your name, so people can see how wide your range is or what your speciality is. So think of a demo reel in terms of not a singular thing. I think it would be a mistake to try and stuff all of your stuff into one demo reel. The other thing too is casting people aren't going to listen to a 5-minute demo reel. They're just not.
Yeah, they just don't have the time.
You've got 30 seconds to show them, hey, I can do this.
So would it always be like first, like your best one first?
Well, I would try to do something great up front, but then also don't make your voiceover demos longer than a minute.
Okay.
Maybe a half. And there's a lot to it. There's the technical aspect of it, getting the sound right.
Of course, yeah. Like equipment. Like if you don't have the good equipment, you're putting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, it's even. And when we're talking about good equipment, we're not talking about expensive equipment. The right equipment to give you the sound that you're looking for. If you want a professional sound, there are certain things that you have to look for. One of them certainly is room treatment. You have to have a room, that has some kind of soundproofing. That can be anything from professional sound foam to blankets hung up. You don't have to spend a lot of money to have a professional sounding voiceover booth, especially these days with the digital aspect of recording equipment. You can have a little laptop with a $100 interface going into a $100 microphone, and you can make that, if you know what you're doing, you can make it sound professional. That's another reason that the voiceover industry has become so much more competitive, is because people, what you used to have to go into a real recording studio to do this stuff before the advent of digital technologies.
It's crazy how things have changed.
Exactly. It was much more expensive to get into voiceover back in the day than it is now. Look at the explosion of podcasts. I mean, everybody in their now has a podcast, and a lot of them sound really professional. So, that's another aspect of competition that and social media that never existed before. you have a platform to present any kind of entertainment or sharing of knowledge through social media. You can be your own star. You can set up your own production company, and it's so easy to do these days. We never had those opportunities before social media, before the internet. It was a very, very different world.
I think like that's the great thing as well, though, because when it comes to, so this is the trap, but it's also the benefit. When you kind of get, it's almost like spoon fed. When you get given like everything on, what's the phrase, like on a platter, like you have everything in front of you. It really kind of separates you from the rest in the sense that you can tell who really wants it and who doesn't, because you, like for example, I have my own mic for my podcast, etc. I've got all these equipment. I only purchased all the stuff I've got because I know I'm committed. This is what I want to do. But so many people think that technology or like having, like especially artists, when I was starting out with the podcast, one of the most common questions I got asked so many times was, what Wacom do you have? What computer specs do you use? What's the latest thing so I can get better? But that's the biggest mistake. It's not about the tools necessarily. It's about you actually doing the craft. Like, what I was talking to Fraser, like speaking of Fraser, so when Fraser was on the podcast, he was telling me how architecture in Scotland has got so much, well, even just worldwide, has got so much worse because the fundamentals of architecture has kind of been lost. Like, there's not much true craftsmanship still available in today's era because they can just like do things digitally, or like they miss like the kind of the magic of that, or like that extra factor, if you know what I mean. And like my point that I'm getting across from here is, yes, like we're talking about tools and equipment, and it is important. Like if you have bad audio, then you're not gonna. It's not a good start for getting a job. But you don't want to rely on it too much. Like it's all about the quality of the voice. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. And it's very much. I'll give you a musical comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Playing a $20,000 guitar in the hands of a beginning guitar student is not going to sound good.
Of course.
A $50 guitar in the hands of Jimi Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan is going to sound amazing because it's not the instrument. And it's so good. Voiceover is not about the microphone. Yes, that helps if you want to have a smooth sound, but it's really the content. I mean, people need to understand it's not about the flashy guitar. It's about how the fingers are moving across the board. It's not about the expensive voiceover booth and the microphone. It's about what your voice is doing, what the words are coming out of your head are saying. What concepts, what ideas are you communicating to people? That's what matters. You can do that on an iPhone and still be, amazing. And I fear that in today's society that the values have changed to valuing the expensive, valuing the high-end equipment, all that stuff, I think has become more prevalent than the dedication to the craft and the communication and the ideas that are coming forward from the person being the central core of what's important.
That's an amazing answer. I completely agree.
If you don't have anything interesting to say, the best microphone in the world isn't going to make you sound smart.
Yeah. Like we put kind of this, I always think it's just a safety net. Like you think it's just I don't know, it's like a kind of like an easy way out, but when it comes to anything in life, it's just all about repetition and practice. And like when it comes to like the performance aspect, what's kind of helped you sell performance better? Because there's one thing that I found really interesting when I was tuning into the podcast for Resident Evil was like a lot of voices are becoming like almost generic, like typical like hero, etc. And actually being more normal is better. Could you kind of dive into, if I'm saying it right, can you dive into what you meant by that?
I wouldn't say better.
Okay.
Different.
Yeah.
And you can always tell the difference between a trained voice and an amateur. A trained voice actor, a trained actor, is going to be able to. First of all, they're going to be able to give you different colorations of their characters. Because they will have done the work to be able to create characters that have purpose and definition and focus. An amateur person is not going to. They're not going to know how to listen to themselves. You have to be able to hear and understand what your voice sounds like on a recording in order to be able to manipulate that. That's what it boils down to. The more you know about the tools, the more you know about the instrument that is your voice, and the more that you work with that instrument, the more you're going to be able to achieve with it. There was a great music teacher named Dick Grove, the Grove School of Music, and he said that technique liberates craft. In other words, you study something, and you play scales over and over and over and over again, and you learn music theory, and you learn vocal techniques. You practice every day. You do scales. Depending on what kind of voice you want to have, you increase the range of your musculature in your throat, and that's what separates the amateur from the professional.
Yeah,
it's that sound. Now, that being said, this trend of voices becoming very heroic and generic and all this stuff, I think, is an aspect of the amount of competition there is today. My approach and my feeling for voiceover is I like a much more naturalistic approach, especially when it comes, and this goes to the narrative of a story. And I've said this on the other podcasts quite a bit. I think that there's nothing interesting about seeing a superhero walk through a field of bad guys and be able to wipe them out. There's nothing interesting about that. What's interesting, and the thing that I tried to bring to Resident Evil, the remake, was the feeling, the sensation of a normal person being immersed in something so horrific they can't even process what's going on. And yet, at the same time, they're doing their job and they're trying to maintain professionalism. It's something that they've been trained for, but not really, because how do you train for zombies? This, in my game, it was really like the first breakout of the zombie whatever. And so these characters, how could you play them as superheroes? How could you, I'm going to go, punch that rock and break it into 1,000 pieces. That's not real. You're taking away the horror aspect of the games. If you're talking about, especially about the survival horror genre of video games, you want to put normal people into those games. There's no point in putting superheroes into them because they're not interesting to watch. You want the character that you're following to be afraid. You want them to be nervous. You want them to make mistakes. Hopefully not while you're trying to kill a zombie, but that's infinitely more interesting to watch than a superhero. I think also much more interesting to listen to. If you turn the video off and just listen to the audio for the movie Alien, it'll still scare the crap out of you.
You'll still be getting goosebumps. You won't survive it.
Exactly. That's one of the prototypical survival horror movies ever made, scripts ever written.
When it comes to just things in general, this is going to sound so cliche, but I prefer, all my favorite films are between the 70s and the 90s. That's my era of movies. I don't really there's obviously certain films that I like that have came out within recently, I guess, the odd one or two, but you actually, it's like what you're saying there, that it always felt real. You felt like you were actually in the scene. Every time you're playing Resident Evil, it's like what you're saying, you have this just thought in the back of your head of, wait, this could be real. There's always that feeling always there. And then when they change the characters later on, I don't know, it's it loses, your voiceover when you were doing it for Chris Redfield, etc., Richard Aitken, like you felt so connected because it just felt believable, if you know what I mean. And when it comes to people who are wanting to do voice acting these days, I think the main thing that I've learned from this is just don't copy what's already out there. Like, I think a lot of people fall into that trap. Would you agree?
I fully agree. People have an expectation of a sound. This is what voiceover sounds like. I'm going to like what I think the generic version of a voiceover person is. And really what it needs to be is you. You be honest. There needs to be, in your voice, you have to be tapping into the real emotions and sensations and thought processes of the characters that you're portraying. You cannot step up to the microphone and say, I'm going to do, okay, so this voice is going to be my generic Texas voice. You can't approach it from that. That's one aspect of it. But unless you're actually tapping into the emotion and the motivation behind the lines that you're speaking, it sounds hollow. The human ear can pick that up. When someone is really getting into the performance, really getting under the skin of their character, you hear it. And when they're when they're phoning in a performance, a generic performance with a generic voice, with a generic character type, and they're not actually feeling anything, you hear that too. And I think that, if there's a good talent to pursue, it's getting to that point as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And that only comes through work and practice and doing your scales as an actor to be able to get to those emotional spots quickly, i.e. in an audition. You have to be able to bring something to that audition that the casting person listens to and goes, oh, that person sounded real. There was a moment of real connection with the character there, even in an audition. Send that in. That's going to put you head and shoulders above the rest of the people who are doing generic, unfeeling or generic feeling, plastic feeling emotions. I think that one of the actor's most important tools, of course, is empathy, is the ability to empathize with the character that you're trying to portray. If you can't fit your mind into the character that you're trying to portray, you're not going to give an honest portrayal of that character.
When you're reading the lines, etc., when it comes to the actual job, I know it depends on the director and the project, etc., but do you get much time to do variation, or do you have to pretty much dive in with the one that you've already got in mind?
It can be.
Okay.
Sometimes I've done gigs where the job was very specific. One of the ones I have in mind is when I did Lord of the Rings. I did one of the many video games that they had based on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, you did the Middle Earth games.
Yeah.
It's insane. It was literally one of my favorite games. So it's so cool you did this. You did the Gimli one as well. Oh, you got to love Gimli.
Well, and that's a very specific thing. I mean, if you're doing Gimli, it's Gimli.
And you did it in a Scottish-based one as well.
Yeah, I did.
So you did as proud.
A dwarf. You have to warm up into Gimli, obviously.
Oh yeah, of course. I completely agree. It's a hard one.
Same thing with Mr. Krabs. You have to warm up into Krabs.
Yeah. Well, that was I know we've talked for such a long time. By the way, thank you so much for everything you've said. By the way, it's been a pleasure having you on. I did want to throw this question to see what you say. I know this is a probably difficult question, but do you have a favorite voice you've ever done? Out of all the voices, was there maybe one that was just the I don't know, a highlight of your career, or is there a few that you'd narrow it down to? Because you've done so many different ones.
I'll give you two.
Okay.
One of my favorite voices is the guard in Emperor's New Groove, who says, "I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's Groove."
Wait, that's you. Perfect.
That one, and the other favorite that I have is of the puppy in Hotel Transylvania.
Hotel Transylvania. Oh.
The entire line is, "Hi, Bob." That's all he says.
That's all he says, yeah.
I drove down to Sony,
Mm-hmm.
went into the recording studio, met with the casting person. The director was there. You know, it's in this big, huge sound room, and they go, "Okay, go ahead. Hi, Bob. Hi, Bob. Hi, Bob." I did that probably 10 times, and they said, "Okay, thanks."
Perfect. That's you done. That's incredible. But that's the thing as well. Is like, I think it's when it comes to all the different roles you've done. Like you've done literally so many. Like I've literally got a list of only like a quarter that you did. Like Meet the Robinsons, Chicken Little, like literally my childhood. The Princess of the Frog, I like Tarzan, Bolt, Home of the Range. It's an absolute incredible career, man. Like thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Ross, entirely my pleasure. And if you ever want to do this again, just let me know.
Oh, it would be an absolute pleasure to have round 2. I can't wait. I'll make sure to write on the notes. Thank you so much, everyone who's been tuning in today's podcast. As always, everything we discussed, I'll make sure to put everything in the description so you guys don't miss out. If it's your first time here, I always put the timestamps so you can literally go to each section of the podcast. So as always, folks, if you guys are new to the podcast, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to smash the like button. As always, it really helps the channel grow. And with that said, folks, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.